Guess who just joined the College Board with David Coleman? Kathleen Porter McGee. I mean, this is a small contingency, but I'm telling you, they are all in. They know exactly what they need to do, when they need to do it. They haven't missed a time or benchmark yet. And the gap is closing for us to stop this. But David Coleman recently also has been going around to a lot of Christian, this is where the Mike Huckabee thing comes in. If any of you are familiar with Mike Huckabee endorsing Common Core recently. They are really pushing for this whole Christian association, Christian endorsement, to the point of saying it helps children read the Bible, the new ELA standards. I mean, they're really, I look at it as very encouraging that they are really fighting this hard. They have to go out and start doing these type of things to try and validate and keep this thing in place. They know it's falling apart. But David Coleman gave a presentation. The audience, so to speak, is a bunch of tech geeks. You can go ahead and play it. Listen carefully at the very beginning especially.
When I was involved in convincing governors and others around this country to adopt these standards, it was not Obama. Do you think that would have gone well with the Republican crowd? So what we're finding as the new president called for is I'm obsessed with moments where there's overwhelming evidence. Does that make sense? And the moment of action to be taken. And I think we have discovered ones that I believe Dan Ragnar may have talked to you about already yesterday. Did he share some of this already? Some, said Aaron. To my right. I want to introduce a topic that, as I introduce it, I want to talk about another man who used data to change the world. Someone might admire quite a bit. Because, again, as you think about your power and your force in this world, let's remember who really won the election. Shall we call it Nate Silver? Against all the blowhards of political commentary, the predictions of the nerds were decisive. But perhaps more exciting than the person who stood to the side and handicapped the election is the person who led the Obama campaign's use of data to galvanize a generation of low-income people to vote like they never have before. Whether you are Republican or Democrat, the simple precision and excellence of the use of information to achieve a result is something in my mind that deserves astonishment. It means, again, that there is no forced limit. Think about it. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on this campaign. And what made the difference, right? A lot of things. But this incredible precision and insight gained from data, not only on where people are, testing various interventions, seeing what works, keeping focus on delivering it, and that, of course, is Dan Ragnar, who led the analytics of the campaign. Is that correct? We're partnering with Dan Ragnar's team in the campaign on the data side we actually have the largest set of data perhaps on some counts. As a membership institution, we have a large school counseling department, members of college board, high schools and colleges. How can we leverage our members in a sense as an army to propel these kids forward? So it's what we can do directly with students, but also caring adults informed by data can do for their students. For that, we're partnering with another side of the campaign, the Obama campaign that is, with Jeremy on mobilizing, the field mobilization, right? So it's data and it's field mobilization. But we're also talking about communications. We're talking about advocacy and policy. We met the other day on their invitation at the White House because they saw that we were going to take the lead on this issue and they saw an opportunity for this country to get something done. Some people call it low-hanging fruit, which I find a strange way to describe a low-hanging person, but I'll take it. When I was involved in convincing governors and others around this country to adopt these standards, it was not Obama. Do you think that would have gone well?
You can It must have looped.
I'm glad they repeated it, though.
Yeah, actually, that was perfect. By design, Providence. As far as David Coleman, what the things that I know that's not really easily understood or heard, or clearly rather, he just said, he started with saying, when I was going around the country trying to get Republican governors to sign on to this. Okay? David Coleman from Achieve Inc., going around to represent Republican governors. Now, again, remember this was state-led and voluntary. He had to go out and sell this, and he made sure not to sell it that it was something Obama wanted, because that wouldn't have worked. And he uses the word, that was him verbatim, duped. Now, we say that he said it. He duped the Republican governors in his presentation of what this was.
And by the way, he's not a teacher.
No.
He's one of 4 developers. He is not a teacher. He is a businessman and now the president of the College Board. But, you know, we need all of this data in order for children to be successful. I mean, I don't know if there are any teachers here who live for that light bulb moment. For when you finally reach a child, because you've gone the normal route, it didn't work. So you go through the back door and it's shut. Then you go through the window and there's a little crack, and that child gets it, and you see the light bulb go off over there. Man, you can't be dictated how to teach and have that moment, because it doesn't leave time for the best practices and innovation that take place when we allow teachers to teach. We've turned them into administrators, I think. But we need to let them teach, because they do a great job when we uncuff them.
He ended or that piece anyway, ends with, what are they doing now? Again, another part of the timeline. Dan Wagner, Obama for America's Chief Director of Data Analysis, is now running the campaign for rigor. I mean, it all comes together. They don't miss a single thing. So now, this video is maybe 2 months old, tops. So what this tells us is, our Republican governors anyway were duped. The fact that this data is gold to them. When they can control you through the data, and let's face it, one of the comments that was said to me directly after the May 14th hearing from Representative Brenner, when I said, did you hear how many times Tom Gunlock got that incorrect about student identifiable data? I said, he's either does not know what the Ohio Revised Code says, or he is actually lying. And I handed it to him and read it to him, and his response to me was, yeah, but we won't use it for that.
Just like the IRS won't use
Exactly.
confidential information, or the NSA won't.
And then, you know, to Taya's point that she brought up with that comment, maybe you won't. Who follows you in here? That's how we've gotten here, this slow erosion of what we are, our basic principles, first principles that we all grew up with. There were certain things you just didn't do and certain things you knew you had to do. And you answered to authority, and you answered to other people's parents. And you had self-respect, and you had personal responsibility. We have allowed that, we have abdicated our authority to the experts, and we are paying the price for it. This campaign for rigor, one of the things that I have read that is a part of this is through these electronic textbooks, that popular culture that was a part of that Grit, Tenacity, and Perseverance report. They're actually advertising in those textbooks. It's Goebbels, type of stuff in terms of propaganda. I'm sure many of you have seen that on the Weather Channel. I can't put on the Weather Channel on my phone without a scroll of what Obama has done for the mortgage market recently and have I reapplied for financing. It is this constant drumming, and that's what these kids are going to be subjected to. Many of them already are. But when you look at those 400 data points that they're collecting, it is gold. If you are talking about managing people and children, they want to know how many dryers are in your household. They want to know your voting status. They want to know your religious affiliation. Down to the blood type, because as we all know, with Obamacare, The data points are being collected on the students and the FERPA law change. It is superseding HIPAA law. So if you think that HIPAA law is going to protect you from giving your child's data or health information to the feds, it isn't. If they go see the counselor because they're having a bad day, that's getting recorded. Every single thing they do will be in a data file. And based on what we've heard recently, probably out in the building in Utah. I mean, this is all purposefully by design. And if we continue to deny where we're at and what we are basically subjecting our children to, I honestly believe, because of the generations below me, that I was the last generation to even get a glimpse of how we were intended to be raised and educated. And I have the constant quote of Ronald Reagan that runs through my head. That will I be of the generation that has to tell my grandchildren what it was like to live free and what it used to be like in America? And I truly think we're at that tipping point. I really do. So I would just ask all of you to, don't take this lightly. Do your own research. I don't know all of it by any means. Like I said, I'm one of you. It was just one of those things. This hit me to the point like I can't sit there anymore. I've got to run with this, for fear maybe no one else will. But time is of the essence. Do not accept these excuses out of the State House. They don't have any authority we don't give them. Quit allowing them to pretend that they do. Quit giving them excuses. Make them answer to you. They represent you. So, one last thing about David Coleman. A month ago, Debbie Terhard, state school board president, wanted a debate down in Southwest Ohio. The Tea Party that she came from, so to speak, the Northwest Hamilton County Tea Party, put on a presentation. They found another mom that would go represent our side, so to speak, the side of liberty and the side of protecting our children. There were many incidences throughout that event, but this video played at the end. Debbie Terhar came up to the podium afterwards with her closing remarks to say that she has met David Coleman many times, and that's not the David Coleman she knows. Now, if she can't do any kind of deductive reasoning, that maybe she was a part of the pack that got duped. I mean, these are the people in charge. So I guess I would just want to impress upon you that no one has more power than you do. And I can guarantee you, nobody loves your children, your grandchildren more than you do. So this idea that this is all for their benefit, don't accept it.
Did you tell him what Max said to us when we walked in?
No, I don't remember that.
To Heidi's point about we have the power.
Oh, yes.
When we walked into the first representative's office in March, April?
It was the Tuesday after the forum, so it was April 16th.
And we had asked all of the people with whom we met in Cincinnati and Columbus and Cleveland. There were, I think, 1,000+ people that came to these forums, and to make calls to their legislators. And the first representative's office into which we walked said, "I know why you're here." Now, he had not met either of us, but he knew that he was having an appointment with two ladies. And I said, "Why are we here?" He said, "You're here about that Common Core business." I said, "We are here about that Common Core business. What do you know about it?" He said, "All I know is that our phone has been ringing off the hook for 2 days." So I said, "Okay, well, let me tell you what you need to know." The folks that thoroughly vet this in the legislature, on the state school board, people who dive in and spend even a day researching this and come out still supporting it, fall into two categories. They either can't wrap their head around it and just go, "I don't see anything wrong with this," or there's some block of some kind, or they are benefiting politically or financially from its implementation. That is what we have found as we have met with school board members, state school board members, legislators, and folks that were appointed by the governor. So
Certainly.
Sure.
What we've done is set this microphone up for questions, so anybody that has any questions, feel free to come up. We have room for a line, and maybe I can start.
Okay.
We just ended on talking to state representatives, and I asked our state representative to come to a Liberty meeting. There was definitely a disconnect between the citizens that were there and the state representative and what he heard. And we had to agree to disagree. Is there any recommendations you can give myself or anybody else here? How do we deal with state representatives that are looking, that don't understand or haven't done their homework?
If they haven't done their homework, then you need to get rid of them. Who is your rep?
It was Mike Henry, State Representative Mike Henry.
Mike Henry.
Yes, and he was here, and he actually has taken notes, and he,
Okay, great.
So is he gone?
yes, he had.
Okay.
Okay.
Because one of the other things I would like to point out, and I'd like to ask,
He had kids playing tennis sports, so he was here. That's good.
well, one of the things you can ask him, since Representative Henny is a very important representative because he's on the House Education Committee. So when Representative Thompson's bill is introduced, which will likely be tomorrow, it'll be referred to committee. It'll go to the House Ed Committee. So Representative Henny's position on this and him getting up to speed is critical because Thompson's going to need as much support as he can get in that committee because Representative Stubbleton has been quoted as saying he will have to be drug out kicking and screaming if in fact we're able to pull back on Common Core. Stubbleton doesn't have anything to lose in the sense he's termed out. I'm sure he's just going home after next year. But Representative Brenner is the vice chair. He has all kinds of things to win or lose because we all know how that whole leadership thing works. We've certainly seen it play out under Boehner, whether people do make decisions and choices based on principle or whether it's for their own hide in their next election and whether they're going to get the PAC money they need from the Speaker's office or in Ohio from the GOP or from Batchelder's, blessing their election and so forth. We watched that play out in our district between Peter Stoutberg and Tom Brinkman. Unfortunately, Peter Stoutberg won. But he had $250,000 spent on his campaign from Columbus. But an hour prior to the May 14th hearing that Stubbleton set up, that was a result of us basically sending a deluge of people and calls to Columbus for that month following the forums, demanding a hearing. Let us get into the State House Ed Committee and have a hearing so that people can hear what this is. State legislators, particularly the Ed Committee, had no idea what they were dealing with. I put together what I called a legislator packet. I gave one to every single Republican member of the House Ed Committee an hour prior to that hearing. It included a comprehensive white paper from the Pioneer Institute. It's the most succinct report I have found. Completely, half of it is sightings that they could have gone for references. I put in there the ODE rebuttal that they had all received at the end of April, the ODE facts. Every single one of where I refute their, quote, claim is sourced. I have a page of cited sources and references. There was also probably another 15 pieces of information in there. There is no excuse, in my mind, for any of them at this point to say that they don't know what we're talking about. That the House Ed Committees, the Republicans in particular, they received that packet. If they have not read it 2 months later, they should be fired for no other reason than that. This is their responsibility. They are paid for this.
And I would also say, ask any representative with whom you speak to source their information. They cannot.
Hi, my name is Vivian. I was looking at what you said about the tax exemption. I was wondering how that is related to No Child Left Behind. I never did understand that, if it is at all.
I'm not sure when you say the tax exemptions.
I mean, you said everything is for RTTT.
Oh, the Race to the Top?
Yeah.
The Race to the Top grant. right now, I don't know if any of you have heard about some of the pieces of legislation at the federal level. In the Senate, there's 1094, which is Strengthening American Schools, which is a double down on putting Common Core in at a federal level. These are all reauthorization acts for the No Child Left Behind, which was a reauthorization act for the ESEA, which is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. That is from President Johnson from 1965. That was where the feds came in, and that's what you hear as Title I funds. They came in and said that the underprivileged or poor children and so forth within the country were at a disadvantage to the middle class in terms of educational opportunities and outcomes. So President Johnson put in this act of 1965, and that's where the Title I funds were supposed to go out and be distributed specifically to districts and or populations of poor children in order to bring up and equalize that base. Well, again, another program that did not live up to its worth, but it's been reauthorized it's on a cycle of every 10 years, I believe. No Child Left Behind was nothing but a reauthorization of that 1965 Act of Title I funding. If you dial it back, that's what Goals 2000 and School to Work was as well. So they take these Title I funds, and that's also how they implement federal overreach, is through this act. Race to the top, many people believe that part of the reason a lot of this was able to happen is because in 2009, we were supposed to have reauthorized No Child Left Behind. And they've been fighting about it in Congress. It's never been reauthorized. So some people feel like, well, that vacuum that was left allowed all this piecemealing of, well, we'll do this in the interim, we'll do this, we'll do that. But Race to the Top was not a reauthorization. A reauthorization has not happened. But it basically came in because there was not something else in place. Ohio, that was another one of the carrots, besides the federal dollars, is if you adopted these Common Core standards, it got you out of all of the compliance markers of 2014 that Ohio, along with most other states, were not going to make on the No Child Left Behind. So you got a waiver from having to comply with No Child Left Behind. Another executive order, unilateral decision. President Obama does not have the legislative authority to change congressional law. No Child Left Behind is a law. And he said, you know what, you guys can't do that. I understand, and Congress won't do what they need to, so I'm going to give you a waiver. And all you have to do for this waiver is take these common standards. The line says that it's a common set of standards that meet this criteria. There was only one set of standards that did that, and it's Common Core.
Well, that reminds me when Freehold may take it out of the church, out of the schools, and he was talking about calling it human capital. And I remember when I used to work for the government, it was called like Office of Personnel Management, then everybody started calling it human resources and things like that. So it looks like it's even in the workplace now, because we're human resources, and then we were talking about administration, how the colleges have cost so much now, because there's so many administrators, and now it's like the school is going to be the same. So I don't know, just like the federal government, are we going to sustain all this money coming out of the government and with the budgetary?
Well, that to me is what is so scary about this. You know, the states are constrained. They do have to have a balanced budget, and they are not able, obviously, to borrow money nor print money. The federal government, we're at $17 trillion now. There is no cap on that. If they want to be able to, again, like the Early Learning Challenge, we want to be able to get into early ed. What do? We'll offer a federal grant. How will we pay for it? Bernanke, somebody will take care of it through the Treasury. We'll borrow it. But it's an endless stream of basically using federal dollars, debt finance dollars, to come in and affect state-level functions and policy. And they've been doing it, like I said, for decades. But because of the fact that our U.S. Congress is so out of control, that used to be a measure there. Now they don't care. I mean, and Bush was, as guilty as anybody. The spending is just out of control. It's gotten to the point where you don't blink about anything before. when they talk about $1 trillion, that's meaningless now. They have desensitized us to it. They've desensitized us to debt, to budget deficits, and again, they have an endless stream, we don't. So, Governor Kasich with Medicaid expansion is a prime example. You know what, we'll figure that out when we get there, but we want that money now. At what cost to our liberty? That's meaningless to them.
I'm Krista Jones, and it's good to see you here in Southdown, Westchester. I want to bring up a name you haven't heard yet, Heidi,
Oh,
who is
I'm sorry.
the senator from most of us are here, I think. She's the chairman of the Senate Education Committee. I have it on fairly good authority that she got a lot of contact by phone from one of the local school district's teachers. And she contacted the superintendent of that school and told that superintendent to have the teachers quit calling her office about Common Core. So, my comment is, everybody call Katie Langer's office and tell her what you're going to get from her.
absolutely. I need to say something.
And if they give you any agreement about it, remind her that she works for us. She is our employee, and it is her job to listen to what we have to say.
Oh, sorry. And I'll add to that, thank you very much. Is everyone aware that Jeb Bush is a huge proponent of Common Core? Yeah, like we need another unfunded mandate from him. But remember we said that someone is either benefiting fiscally, financially, or politically from this. Peggy Lehner is Jeb Bush's gal in Ohio for the Excellence in Education organization that he heads that received how many millions from Bill Gates? Lots. Yeah, so there's a political, I don't know about a financial motive there, but there certainly is a political benefit for her doing what she's doing. And she certainly was responsible for a lot of the legislation that was snuck in, a lot of the wording regarding the adoption of standards. It used to say prescribe. One of her bills changed the terminology. Lots of wonderful things that she did. So yes, please call her office.
And since we're in what I call ground zero here, this is on or not? It is, okay. This happened back in, right after I started looking into Common Core. And if I hadn't been looking into Common Core, I would have been completely duped by this. In February, I received an email from 10,000 Moms United, from Peggy Lehner, Senate Education Committee Chairman, and talking about we need school reform, school standard reform, and how she was joining with the Moms of Ohio to get that done. Now, this is February of 2013. Common Core was already in, right? We did this back in 2010. There's no mention that we already have new reform standards. They're not mentioned by name. But the most interesting part about this, de facto group is the fact that this message came from Peggy Lehner at Ohio Business Roundtable. Not from Peggy Lehner from the Ohio Senate, not a personal account. She is a shill for the Ohio Business Roundtable. Now again, that may not affect her directly financially, but it certainly does backdoor financially, politically. Because I can only imagine the amount of donations and alliances she has because she is working this for the crony capitalist of Ohio. They were some of the biggest players in basically advancing this forward with Governor Strickland and getting him on board. So if you take that and you advance it forward, she is one of the ones, different quotes that have been in the paper from Peggy Lehner, she's the one that actually said that we're using fake information. I mean, it's to the point that it would be laughable if it wasn't so critical. So again, coming back to sourcing things, push back on her when she says anything, because she can't source it.
You're misinformed.
Yeah.
Okay, about what am I misinformed? There's a lot of misinformation out there.
So
Well, tell me what I'm misinformed about, please. Well, you know, this whole thing about data mining, that's okay, well, what's your source? We can't give you one.
No, if you get past the first question, with most of them, you own the conversation because all they have is a talking point. But with someone like Peggy Lehner, who was a part of this, who was deep embedded in it, be prepared because she has to play this out. She is all in, and it all rides on this for her. If we take down Common Core, Peggy Lehner by default is taken down as well. I know.
That's
It's like, praise
impetus
God.
enough, isn't it?
So keep in mind that who you are dealing with, though, because she is not going to backpedal on this. She can't afford to. She's too in.
Alicia Hudson,
Hi, Alicia.
besides the obvious of having our board members that we can bring over to, or bring it with us, having them contact representatives, is there anything else that we should be asking them to do?
Asking your local board members to do?
Is there anything we should be asking our local board members to do?
There you go. Just need to be closer. She's asking,
Is there anything we should be asking our local board members to do? Besides contacting representatives?
you should be pushing back on them. One of the things that I have done is go to my local school board meetings, and they allow you to have public comment many times, or you can appear as though you're going to be commenting on whatever the agenda item, and then I quickly divert from that that topic. Because my question to them is, why are you here? You're telling me that you have to do this based on Ohio law. The ODE is telling me that you guys are in control. Who is it? You are the fiduciary agents. We elected you. If you don't serve a purpose, then either step aside or take on the responsibility you are elected to perform. They're all hiding behind the semantics that go on up there as far as who is in control. Again, if there's local control, tell them to put their foot down and say, we're not going to do this. And we want in writing from the state. They can ask their state legislature, I would need you to put into writing that I will not be harmed through my school report card or my state funding by not complying with these standards, because I don't consider it in the best interest of my community and those who elected me. And quite honestly, there's no cost projection that's been done on Common Core for my community and district. Therefore, I don't even know that we can afford it. Worthington Schools just put out that they need $1 million to upgrade their technology for these park online assessments, and which was shortly followed by, guess who's getting a levy? So again, they come in, they seed these programs, and then the feds are gone, and we're left with the bag and the funding. It's taxpayers who don't even have representation because our legislators don't even know what's going on. So they should be called out, and they need to be held accountable. If they say it's outside their control, then ask them to get a letter authorized from the state saying that they can't back out the standards. Somebody needs to put in writing who's in charge.
Thank you. My name is Mike Eater, and I serve on the Fairborn City School District Board of Education. Been there about a year and a half, been no education for me. I will tell you right now, because of some of the work that we've been going on with the Tea Party and Tea Party groups, that my state representative, Rick Corrales, has sent an email tonight saying that he co-sponsored it.
Congratulations. Thank you.
And
Rick
I'll
Corrales?
take some credit for it, but I won't. But I sent him several emails. And the fact of the matter is, I introduced a resolution at our school board meeting to request a one-year delay in the implementation of Common Core, for which I was roundly abused and voted down 4-1. It is going to cost the park is going to cost the Fairborn School District $1.65 million to implement for the third grade reading guarantee. That was very upsetting. My question is, where can I get a copy of those slides?
I'll be happy to send them to you.
Okay.
Your point exactly, though, there is so much value in what you just said, and it doesn't matter that resolution didn't pass your board. Everybody's on record with a vote.
Exactly. I even got an email from one of the board members saying he actually supported me, not at that meeting.
Left us fight it out, did he?
So this is a struggle, folks, we are in it. If you ever want, like 50 years ago, that was, what was going on in federal government never could have gone on. 50 years of bad teaching, 50 years of teaching history incorrectly. I did it just because I had a degree in history. I decided to read the history book that you probably are reading as your child was being taught in high school. It was written by socialists for socialists. This is nothing more, nothing less than indoctrination. And if you want specifics on it, I have a spreadsheet with about 150 or so comments on specific things they said wrong. They described socialism incorrectly. It's actually what they described is what I would refer to as national socialism. We also call it Nazism. And they're.
Your mic just went off.
I just killed it. Did I just kill the mic?
I think so. You killed the mic, Mike.
But anyway, this is, you can't stress any more than that we have to get involved in education. It's going to take us 50 to 60 years to turn this country around because the socialists, unfortunately, the group that I grew up with, took over our education system. They are now in charge. We have to get it back because the youngsters don't know what the country is like. They think there's no American exceptionalism, that Islam is a religion of peace. That, by the way, if you're studying history, is absolutely wrong. They just cut me off again.
Well,
Apparently, I can kill a mic.
I have a quick question. Did they, in that history book, did they quote, "He who owns the youth owns the future"?
No, they didn't
They
say
didn't.
that. No, they didn't say that. And they actually
Shocked.
have some really nice things to say about some really bad people.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll give you this dead mic again. And thank you.
And we need you to work, can you work on Joe for me?
Huh? I am. Joe gets a copy of everything I send to Rick Perales.
Joe and I are sparring, right?
He doesn't have a problem with national
I don't have a card.
curriculum.
Send me your
Stay-at-home
name.
mom.
Yeah, he's referred to you.
Oh, I'm sure he has. Oh, that shocks me.
I just wanted to say that I went to the Ohioans Against Common Core website, and that website had different action items over the last so many months. So I also went and called all my Republican representatives and let them know how I felt about Common Core. They even had some talking points that helped me out because, I mean, I didn't know it about this until sometime, late winter. And so I think a lot of us didn't know. I'm a homeschool mom, and a lot of our homeschoolers don't even understand and didn't know how important this was because they thought it was in the public school system or something else.
Right.
But I was going to say that they could take the camera over the man before me, but last night we met with Rick Perales, and one of the moms actually had emailed him recently, and he emailed back and said he'd like to meet with her. And so she brought several of us, there were 7 moms and dads that came, and we spoke to him about Common Core and educated him on Common Core just directly. And I'm telling you, we learned on our own, and I'm not saying that we're very good at speaking about it, but, we pray to God before.
Yeah, that's right.
And I would say that that's probably where we got what we had because we know we can't do it. And so I just would suggest everybody to pray to God. I'm sure a lot of you are Christians, and I think that it's in His hands, a lot of it, and we're just His instrument. So, but after speaking with him, he asked us if we'd send him more information, and so some of us did, and he wrote back that he's decided to help Thompson. And so I would say that just our conversation was very kind, non-confrontational, and
Thank you. Is this on? No. It is?
It should be. I don't think we can
I think,
necessarily hear it.
I think that's a great point, and I appreciate that. I think a lot of the frustration comes from people who spend a lot of time vetting this, and up until maybe 2 weeks ago, we got a face to the hand and said, you don't know what you're talking about, you're tinfoil, you are crazy, you are misinformed, and these are people whose salaries we pay. We come to them as taxpayers and say, we need you to look into this, and we need you to check this out, because you were subverted in this process. And so there is a lot of frustration with especially the people that claim to understand the principles of state sovereignty and liberty. I mean, quite frankly, I don't have a lot of tolerance for those people. You either get it or you don't. You know, there were some representatives that looked at this immediately and went, oh, that's goals 2000. There were others that went, oh, that's not good. And they saw how it was piecemealed into the legislature. And they saw how they were subverted. And I did want to read that interesting remark from one of the reps with whom we met. I said, look, these are the three same principles that are violated in the Medicaid expansion debate and Common Core debate. There are legal or legislative constitutional issues. There are financial, fiscal issues with regards to the fiscal viability. And there are inferiority issues. And he said, well, bypass the legal because no one cares about that. And for me, that's where it starts. If it was bypassed, if the legislature was bypassed, I mean, that's game over for me because my voice was subverted. And Heidi alluded to the Race to the Top application where they state, this is Ohio's...
That's the adoption of the standards.
The adoption of the standards. But it says, as indicated in Ohio's Race to the Top proposal, Ohio law now requires the State Board of Education to adopt revised standards for ELA, mathematics, science, and social studies by June of 2010. Under Ohio law, the board now has the authority to adopt the content standards without approval from the General Assembly. It's not me making this up. This is online in a PDF. We were subverted.
This letter is signed by Deb DeLille, the former state superintendent. And this is an example of fake information. All of this is coming from either from a public domain. Usually most of the stuff I have found at the ODE site or the U.S. Department of Education site or the Federal Register. And again, coming back to the legality, we are a nation of laws. If we're not going to follow our own laws, nothing else really matters. You don't even have to get down to the inferiority of the standards, because it doesn't matter. When we were told that, my response is, then why am I here begging for one of you to write another piece of legislation that no one's going to enforce? I mean, again, it defies logic. I wonder sometimes if they could hear themselves repeated, if they would even understand themselves. It doesn't make any sense. And we have been so conditioned to accept their responses. That's where we have to stop. Until you get a straight answer and until you get them to react to what you're saying, you're not done. You are not finished with the process. And one of the reasons that we keep talking about Republicans, because believe me, some of the stuff that I've come across in the last couple of days just further implicates the Republicans. If anything, they're dirtier because they claim to not be for federal education. Bob Taft was the first one to sign a grant with Bill and Melinda Gates in 2005. He was also on the board of directors for the Achieve Inc. in 2005. And at their national summit that year, Bill Gates came with all of his action items for what needed to be happening in education reform in the United States. Which the question begs, would anybody care what he had to say if he wasn't a billionaire? What does Bill Gates know about education?
He didn't graduate from college.
He's a college dropout. But to me, he is the epitome of what people should be able to do, and yet for some reason, because he has billions of dollars to throw around, we're supposed to all be subjected to his idea of education reform. He sure
Oh,
does.
there you go. Who do you think is going to get those contracts?
And
for the
monopolies.
schools?
I mean, what was it, 10 years ago? He was in an antitrust lawsuit with the federal government, but, you know.
That went away. Oh, we need to.
There was an RNC resolution that came out on April 14th. The RNC has come out categorically rejecting Common Core standards. And it's shocking and very encouraging. If you read through this, it's a one-page summation of all the things that are wrong with these standards and with the adoption. So one of the reasons that this is important is you can use this against these Republican legislators and say, hey, look, 20 years ago, it used to be a part of the Republican platform to get rid of the U.S. Department of Education. Now you are on board and going against the party line on these Common Core standards. So if you're going to take that stance in that position, that's great. I would like in writing for you to defend that position, and please cite it for me. That's where we have to get to, demanding
You're just going to have to
resources.
break in because she's tough
I
to
know,
stop.
sorry.
I can't remember what I was going to say now.
I'm sorry.
My name is Susan Cox, and I'm a homeschool mom. Prior to that, I was a public school teacher at Sister Cover. And I've been homeschooling for along 11, 12, 13 years. I'm also an assessor, and I do a lot of assessments in this area and Ohio Life. So I see a lot of the letters that are coming back from the school districts accepting our notification. And they're asking for more and more information than I have ever seen before, to the point where I have contacted HSLDA 10 times, scanned the letter, said, please help. They're trying to give us deadlines, we do not need it here to change the system down this year that, like I've never seen before.
Have they changed the rules? I've actually
Ohio
not.
law has made changes lately, and that's what I wanted to briefly talk about, and the fact that everyone is not everyone was told, but there have been changes, quick changes that many, when I knew, saw coming. For instance, all of a sudden, we are permitted to participate in extracurricular activities, and school districts still as a whole are not engaging for any longer. They cannot deny us these extracurriculars. Number two, we are now able to get money for PSEO, so our high schoolers can go to college, which they are ready for, by the time they're out of the 12th grade. So all of a sudden, we have a couple $1,000 that we have rights. And I also
As long as you sign here.
there's the third, which says we may be getting a tax break.
Chris Jordan's law.
Getting a tax break. And I'm just feeling rude right now.
Stroked.
Yep.
Right, it just seems like there's this camel's nose under your tent, and I'm just wondering how concerned we should be about that. It's all coming around the Common Core stuff, and I just wondered what your thoughts were on that. Then I have a very short other question.
My thoughts initially, she's speaking about a bill that Senator Chris Jordan has written that would allow homeschoolers to write off their property taxes based on the curriculum they buy. So like private schoolers, we pay our property taxes and then we pay extra to buy our curriculum. And we have to submit an intended curricula sheet. We have to ask permission from our superintendent to homeschool our children, to which they can say no if they want. I think that's ridiculous because they take our money and they don't have to educate our kids. The only thing I want from them is a thank you card every year. Thank you, Mrs. Shoemake. We don't have to educate your kids and we still take your money. So with regards to the Chris Jordan bill, it sounds really good until you get to the midway. I don't know if you've actually read the bill, but they start wanting information. Here's what you need to submit to us to prove that you're really homeschooling. Okay, I want you to submit that you actually work in Columbus. You know, do you actually earn the money we pay you? Because I don't think you do. And all of information about the family. It's not a friendly bill, in my opinion. And again, it sounds real good. Everyone is tightening their belts financially. And so when I pay that tax bill yearly, I can tell you that I scrunch up because it would be covered. Our curriculum that we choose to educate our kids with would be covered by that money. But I don't want any strings. I don't want them in our homeschool. So I am interested to see where that bill goes, but I don't think it's a coincidence, to answer your question, that there's data mining that is starting with the Common Core assessments, and they want homeschool information, more and more homeschool information. In New York, homeschoolers were already into the system because of the way they have to operate in New York, and they did not know it. And one of them found out, and it was a big, and the district said, "Oh, we're sorry. We didn't know that we were doing that."
And that, another example though, Chris Jordan is probably the most conservative senator in the Ohio
Yeah.
Senate.
Yeah.
This is a prime example of, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I believe 100% that Chris Jordan's intentions were good. He's thinking the homeschoolers are being left out. This is not fair. What he doesn't realize is he is enveloping them in a system that the undergirding is there for that very purpose. If we can just get that form from that family,
Yeah.
we pull them in.
It's the
We
nose.
will find
in the
another thing to do, another federal grant, some other way to utilize that information and force them to become a part of this collective. And that's part of the problem. Representative Brenner has introduced House Bill 181. It's worthless, but it was a knee-jerk reaction. He wanted to be the hero, to say we're not going to send any data to the feds, any student identifiable data. But because he hasn't done his homework, because he's too proud to say, I need you to come up here and educate me on what you know that I don't, he goes and sponsors a bill and redirects people, misdirects people, and is muddying the waters for what really needs to be done, which is a full repeal.
Right, and when this information hit the loops and Facebook pages, there was a lot of violence. There wasn't a hurrah. And I don't know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families that have got to the loops, and there was a couple of, oh, that's nice, but a lot of, wait a minute. There wasn't just, you would think, oh, we wanted this, but I don't know who wanted it. It just didn't hear about it. But the other question I have is, how else will it affect us besides that college entrance exam? Is there any other way? Could they ever, how
Yes.
could they
Curriculum.
monitor,
Textbooks.
they have to have a marshal at our front door sitting at our kitchen table or something, I don't know. How can they monitor, how can it affect us other than those state work tests? Because I think colleges, being academic as they are, will see the Common Core as dumbing things down. Maybe they won't even want students to do well on the ACT anymore. I don't know.
That's a great question. I stopped you at, could they? And the answer is yes, because they'll do whatever they need to do. There is another area that is affecting homeschoolers with regards to this, and it's publishers. Publishers are already changing their content, and that affects our choices. Now, I have no problem with a publisher changing their content because the market demanded they change their content. But we're not in a free market system when government changes the rules and dictates the criteria to which they must adhere in order to stay in business. There's a whole other name for that. It's fascism.
We're down to our last question, and then we'll wrap things up. And I want to push it, I know people are just getting late, but I want to thank everybody for coming.
Yes, thank you.
This will be a quick one. Can everyone hear me? I appreciate how much you know, ladies. I mean, I sat here and I'm just overwhelmed. I don't know very much. And I know it's the Obamacare, Agenda 21, Common Core, which is part of that, is all done because people are ignorant in our society. People don't know about it. So we need to be able to share it. And I cannot do what you're doing, and plus people don't want to sit and listen. I mean, people like us who are interested do, but the average person, the parent who has no clue, we need from you a 10-point talking list. We need something that is, like, do you know information is being restored about your children. Okay, that's what we need. And we need to be able to go out and share this with our neighbors, our friends, our church members, even in just conversation, bring it up, and then have a resource for them to get further information. But if we try to show all this, we get lost. So I appreciate all you know, but we need to do something simpler.
No, and believe me, we appreciate that. This recently came out from the Heartland Institute. Joy Pullman put this together. And because most, 90% of this is common across the states, so are pretty much the bullet points and the concerns. So if you're looking for a general piece, this is a one-page all-inclusive. Joy does a fantastic job, and one of her focus is on the data collection. She probably knows more about that than anybody else that I've spoken with. But is that on your website? I don't have this up on this is Heartland Institute. Now, I will put this up on my website, Ohioans Against Common Core. The flyers, the brochures or flyers that are out there on the table, on the back side, there's 4 websites listed. Ohioans Against Common Core, TAEA's site, which is Education Freedom Ohio. Go to both of those. On mine, you can subscribe to it so that anytime I send out an action alert or a new item, you'll be notified. But the other piece that I've referred to this evening that is state-specific, and again, some of the pushback you'll get from your state legislator, at least initially, because this is what they're working off of, are the talking points they've gotten from Colleen Grady, who is the Education Policy Director for Speaker Batchelder's office, and from the Ohio Department of Education. This right here, this 3-page document, which is a 2-page rebuttal to the ODE that I prepared, and the 3rd page is all the sites or resources being cited to validate my claims. This is on my website. It's a second tab called Ohioans Fight Back. You can go out there, it's a PDF, print it off. You can also, it's a linked source, so if you go out there and click on the links, every one of those sources will come up. Because it's critical that we realize what we're dealing with. And you do need to be able to speak clearly, because otherwise they very easily derail you. They've been trained to do it that way. So don't take their answers without having something that you have basically educated yourself, brought yourself up to speed enough to have a good conversation with your representative.
Start with this.
Yeah.
Definitely start with that first.
Well, I'd like to recognize our speakers tonight. It's Heidi Huber and, I'm sorry.
Taya Shoemake.
Taya Shoemake.
Taya.
That's okay. You
Taya
got close
Shoemake.
She's used to that. Her mother did that to her, didn't
But let's all give them a warm welcome for being here tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming.
she? Yeah, thank you.
And there is information in the back on the tables. Again, feel free. Please make sure everybody signs the Workplace Freedom Amendment. And thank you much for coming.
There is a spot on my website as well where you can send me a question in the reply box. That comes directly to me. So if there's something you think of later or you didn't get to ask tonight, please feel free to email me and I'll be happy to get back to you.
I also failed to say one important thing. This wonderful church was what we were welcome to use this, and I feel it our responsibility to give a donation. There is a basket out there if anybody can see it in their heart to give a little bit for the use of this facility. That's also appreciated. Thanks again.
George.
Say again? Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for coming up after.
Really looking forward to being
And did I meet you in Westchester? Did you come to the Westchester meeting? No, okay. You look kind of familiar, so I was wondering if I met you somewhere before.